The heavy rain poured over the abandoned workshop like heaven itself was weeping. Under the dim light of a broken bulb, a man knelt on the greasy floor, his face bruised and bleeding. His shirt, once white, was torn and soaked in mud. Before him stood a furious young woman, trembling with rage and heartbreak, holding a torn letter that revealed the truth she was never meant to see. "So it's true!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the storm. "You've been lying to me all this time. You're not a poor man, you're a billionaire." The man raised his head slowly, his dark eyes filled with sorrow. "Amara," he said softly, "please, let me explain." But Amara threw the letter into his face. "Explain what, Damilola? That all this love was just a test?" Her voice cracked. "You made me fall for a lie." Outside, thunder roared like judgment itself. Damilola stood to his feet slowly, his chest rising with quiet pain. "I didn't lie to hurt you," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "I hid my wealth because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have." Amara shook her head violently, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. "Don't insult me with that nonsense. Do you know how it feels to struggle every day while the man I trusted was pretending to be poor?" She stepped closer, eyes burning with betrayal. "You watched me suffer, you watched me sell my jewelry to feed us, and all that time you had billions hidden in your name." Damilola opened his mouth, but no words came. She slapped him hard, and he stood frozen. "You are worse than the men you claim to hate." For a moment, silence filled the air except for the pounding rain. Then Amara turned away, her voice trembling. "You said you were homeless, Dami. You said you had no one." Her tone cracked with pain. "I believed you. I defended you when everyone called you useless. And now, I find out you own half the city." Damilola took a deep breath. "Yes, I do," he confessed quietly. "But I also own something more painful. Loneliness. Money has always brought me liars, users, and deceivers. I wanted to know what it means to be loved by someone real." Amara's lips trembled, torn between rage and heartbreak. "Then you should have trusted me with the truth," she whispered. "Because now, I don't know if I ever loved you, or your lie." Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating Damilola's sorrowful face. He reached out gently, but Amara stepped back, clutching her chest. "Don't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave you my heart when I had nothing. You took it and made it your experiment." She turned toward the workshop door, her shoulders shaking. Damilola's voice broke as he called after her. "Amara, please, don't leave like this. I swear everything I did was because of love." She paused at the doorway, her back to him, the rain blurring her figure into shadow. "Love built on lies will always collapse," she said bitterly. And then she walked away, disappearing into the storm. When the door slammed shut, Damilola fell to his knees, the weight of regret pressing on his chest. The truth was out, and with it, the only woman who had ever seen his heart was gone. In the silence that followed, the sound of rain became his punishment. "She was the one," he murmured, staring at the ring still clutched in his palm. "The only one who saw me, not my wealth." His voice broke, and for the first time in years, the billionaire cried, not as a man of power, but as a man who had lost the one thing his money could never buy. That night, the storm outside faded, but in Damilola's soul, the thunder would never stop. 2 months before that stormy night, the world knew Damilola Ajayi as one of the youngest billionaires in West Africa. At just 34, he owned a chain of auto manufacturing plants, luxury estates in Lekki and Abuja, and a private jet he rarely used. But behind the glamour, Damilola was drowning. Every woman who came into his life wanted one thing: his name, his money, his influence. They praised him in public and mocked him in private. One evening, at a high-class charity event in Victoria Island, he overheard two women laughing about him. "He thinks he's special," one whispered. "Once he buys me that Benz, I'm gone." Damilola smiled politely across the hall, but inside, his chest burned. That night, as he stared out of his penthouse window, he said to himself, "If love exists, I want to find it without my name attached." It was a dangerous thought, one that would soon change his life forever. The next morning, Damilola made a decision no billionaire in his circle would ever dare. He told his trusted driver, Musa, to take him to Ajagunle, one of the busiest and poorest neighborhoods in Lagos. He wore torn jeans, a faded t-shirt, and scuffed shoes that hadn't seen daylight in years. "Oga, are you sure about this?" Musa asked, glancing through the rearview mirror. "Yes," Damilola replied firmly. "From now on, I'm not Oga Damilola. I'm just Dami, a homeless mechanic trying to survive." Musa's mouth fell open. "Mechanic? Homeless?" Damilola smiled faintly. "Don't worry, Musa. The only way to know real people is to become one of them." When they reached the crowded streets, Damilola stepped out, inhaling the smell of fuel, sweat, and fried plantain. For the first time in years, nobody recognized him. The streets didn't bow to power. Here, everyone was equal, hungry, struggling, and alive. He found an old workshop, run by an elderly man named Babatunde, whose eyes carried the wisdom of hardship. The old man squinted at him suspiciously. "You say you be mechanic?" he asked, wiping grease off his hands. Damilola nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I sabi small work. I just need chance." Babatunde studied him for a moment and finally said, "Oya, make I see wettin' you fit do." He pointed to a dusty Toyota parked in the corner. Damilola rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Years of owning an automobile company had taught him theory, but now his hands met reality. After 2 hours of sweat and burnt knuckles, the engine roared to life. Babatunde's eyebrows lifted. You get sense," he said with approval. "You go work here, but no salary yet. No food and shelter I fit give you." Damilola smiled. "Thank you, sir. That's all I need." And so, the billionaire became a street mechanic. Days turned into weeks. Damilola learned the rhythm of survival, waking before dawn, fixing engines, sharing laughter with street boys, and eating bread with a kara at the roadside stand. The air was filled with curses, radio music, and the smell of diesel. But for once, he felt free. He slept on a worn mattress behind the workshop and kept his true identity locked away like a secret wound. Yet every night, when he lay under the noisy hum of mosquitoes, he wondered if he'd gone too far. Could he really find love here, among people who saw him as nothing? Then one morning, fate answered. A small blue car rolled into the workshop, coughing smoke like an old man. The driver stepped out, a young woman with fierce eyes and a voice that commanded attention. "Who can fix this nonsense car?" she snapped. "I've been stuck for 2 hours." The men stared, stunned by her confidence. Damilola stepped forward, wiping his hands on his shirt. "I fit try, madam," he said quietly. She frowned. "Try? I need someone who can fix it, not try." He smiled gently. "Just give me 10 minutes." Her name was Amara Okafor, a 27-year-old fashion designer with ambition burning in her veins. She was beautiful, bold, and unapologetically proud. As Damilola bent under her car, she folded her arms impatiently, glancing at her phone every few seconds. But when he stood up 15 minutes later and the engine purred back to life, her eyes softened for the first time. "You're not bad," she said reluctantly. Thank you, Ma, he replied with a humble nod. She handed him a crisp 1,000 naira note and drove off without another word. But as her car disappeared down the street, Damilola found himself smiling. Something about her, her fire, her strength, her refusal to pretend, stirred something deep in him. That night, he couldn't sleep. The rain fell softly on the tin roof, and all he could see was her face. The billionaire disguised as a poor man had finally met the woman who would test the truth of his heart. The next few days passed like whispers on the wind, yet Damilola couldn't stop thinking about Amara. Her voice replayed in his head, the impatience, the spark, the unspoken warmth beneath her pride. He found himself hoping her car would break down again, just so he could see her face. And fate, with its strange sense of humor, granted that wish. 3 days later, the same blue car rolled into the workshop. Amara stepped out, sighing in frustration. "Not again," she muttered. "This useless car will kill me one day." Damilola looked up from where he was fixing a generator, his heart skipping. "Good morning, madam," he said softly. Amara turned, surprised. "You again?" she said, folding her arms. "Did you charm my car so it keeps bringing me back here?" Damilola smiled faintly. "Maybe the car just likes me." For the first time, Amara laughed, a quick, reluctant laugh that melted the tension around them. "You have jokes now, Abby?" she teased. Damilola only nodded humbly. Sometimes laughter repairs more than spanners. That day marked the beginning of something neither of them planned. Amara started coming more often, not just when her car had problems, but sometimes to drop snacks for the workers or sit quietly under the shed. She claimed it was because she liked the air around the workshop. It reminded her of home. But Baba Tunde and the boys knew better. They'd catch her watching Dami from a distance, smiling to herself. And Damilola, though he tried to act calm, felt his heart beating faster whenever she was near. One afternoon, as he wiped grease from his arms, Amara offered him a bottle of cold water. "Here," she said casually. "You look like you need it." Their fingers brushed lightly, and something electric passed between them. Damilola looked up, caught in her gaze. For a moment, the noise of the workshop faded, the laughter, the clanging metal, the world. Only their breathing remained. Still, Amara was not the type to fall easily. She was cautious, proud, and fiercely independent. She told herself she didn't care about a poor mechanic, yet every day her feet somehow led her back to that workshop. She would scold herself in the mirror each morning. "Amara, you are a big girl," she'd whisper. "You run your own boutique, you pay your bills. You can't be liking a man who smells like engine oil." But when Damilola smiled at her, his quiet, gentle smile, her heart betrayed her. One rainy evening, she found herself sitting beside him as he repaired an old motorcycle. The rain drummed softly on the roof, and lightning flickered in the distance. "Why are you always so calm?" she asked suddenly. "Even when people insult you or shout at you, you just smile." Damilola paused, then said quietly, "Because anger solves nothing. A man must learn to control the fire inside him before life uses it to burn him." Amara blinked, caught off guard. She had never heard a poor man speak like that. The more she listened to him, the more she saw there was something different about this mechanic. He spoke like someone educated, someone refined, yet he lived with simplicity and humility. One day she found him reading an old book during his break. "You read?" she asked in surprise. Damilola nodded. "I read whenever I can. Books remind me that no matter how small you feel, your mind can travel anywhere." That answer stayed with her all day. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She replayed every word he said, Every glance they shared, every time his eyes softened when she smiled. Something was happening inside her, something she didn't understand and couldn't stop. It wasn't pity, it wasn't curiosity, it was love, quietly blooming in the cracks of their differences. And for the first time in her adult life, Amara began to believe that happiness didn't always come wrapped in wealth. It sometimes wore old jeans and grease-stained hands. Weeks passed, and the bond between them deepened. They would sit outside after work, sharing roasted corn and stories. Amara spoke about her dreams of opening a fashion line. Damilola listened, his eyes filled with admiration. She asked about his past, and he always smiled sadly. "Let's just say life taught me that money can't buy peace," he'd say. Sometimes she'd catch him staring into space, his face shadowed by thoughts he never shared. But she didn't push. Love doesn't need all the answers. It just needs truth in the eyes. Then, one Saturday evening, as the sun melted into gold over the city, Amara whispered something she never thought she'd say. "Dami," she said softly, "I don't care if you're rich or poor. I just know that when I'm with you, I feel safe." Damilola turned to her, his chest tightening. For the first time, he wanted to tell her everything, to drop the mask and let her see who he really was. But fear stopped him. "One day," he murmured, "you'll know all my truths." And she smiled, unaware that love was walking straight toward its test. Love is sweetest when it's hidden, but secrets have short lives. Amara and Damilola's quiet romance soon began to draw whispers. Her boutique friends noticed her glowing differently, her laughter softer, her eyes always distant. "You're seeing someone," her best friend Tenny teased one morning as they arranged fabrics at the store. "Who's the lucky guy?" Amara smiled shyly. "He's different." But when she described him, a poor mechanic from Ajagunle, Tenny froze. "Wait, what? You mean a roadside mechanic?" Amara's smile faded. "He's not just a mechanic, Tenny. He's hardworking, honest, gentle." "And broke," Tenny cut in. "Amara, be serious. You're beautiful, smart, and classy. You can have any man in Lagos. Why choose someone who fixes carburetors for a living?" Amara looked away. "Because he sees me for who I am, not for what I own." Tenny laughed coldly. "My dear, love doesn't pay bills. Don't let feelings make you foolish." That night, Amara lay in bed, her heart torn between love and pride. But when she remembered Damilola's eyes, the kindness in them, she whispered, "He's worth it." Days later, her mother found out. Mrs. Okafor was a woman of power and class, one of those society women who wore her pride like jewelry. She overheard a conversation between Amara and Tenny and nearly dropped her teacup. "You're doing what?" she shouted when Amara returned home. "Dating a mechanic?" Amara stiffened. "Mama, please. It's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think," her mother snapped. "After all the education we gave you, after all my prayers, you're bringing shame to this family." Amara's younger brother peeked from the hallway, curious, but her mother's glare sent him running. "Mama, Dami is a good man," Amara pleaded. "He may be poor, but he has dignity." Her mother's voice trembled with anger. "Dignity? Can dignity buy you a house? Can dignity pay bride price? I raised you better than this." But Amara stood her ground. "I'm not marrying a bank account. I'm marrying a man." The room fell silent. For a moment, even her mother's tongue failed her. Then she whispered coldly, "You will regret this." The confrontation left Amara shattered. For days, her mother refused to speak to her, giving her the cold silence that stung worse than insults. At work, her friends mocked her behind her back. "Mechanic wife," one whispered when she walked past. but Amara pretended not to hear. In the evenings, she'd escape to the workshop, where Damilola's smile washed the world away. He noticed her sadness one night and asked gently, "Who's troubling you?" She hesitated, then told him everything: her friend's laughter, her mother's rejection. Damilola listened quietly, then took her hands. "Amara, people fear what they don't understand," he said softly. "They believe love belongs only to the rich. But real love, true love, thrives in the dust, not in diamonds." His words soothed her, but deep down, he felt guilt pressing on his heart. Each time she defended his poverty, it cut him deeper. He was the cause of her pain. He told himself, "Soon I'll tell her the truth." But not yet, not while her heart was still learning to trust. Weeks later came the breaking point. Mrs. Okafor, desperate to save her daughter from disgrace, arranged a dinner with Chief Balogun's son, a wealthy businessman with political ties. Amara refused to attend, but her mother insisted, "If you love me, you'll come." Reluctantly, she agreed. That evening, she sat at a gold-plated dining table, her mother beaming proudly beside her. The chief's son, Femi, wore an expensive suit and a smug smile. "I've heard so much about you," he said smoothly. "You run your own boutique. That's impressive. I like hard-working women, as long as they know their place." Amara forced a polite smile but felt disgust crawl up her skin. "And what place is that?" she asked. Femi chuckled. "Behind her husband, of course." Her mother laughed nervously, but Amara pushed her chair back. "I'm sorry, Mr. Femi," she said coldly. "If that's your view of women, you're not my type." And with that, she stood and left. Outside, she breathed the night air, tears of anger stinging her eyes. In that moment, she knew one thing for certain. She didn't care about wealth. She wanted love that was real. When she reached the workshop that night, Damilola was still working, his shirt soaked with sweat. She walked straight to him, hugged him tightly, and whispered, "You're all I need, Dami. Let the world say what it wants. I choose you." His hands froze, trembling slightly before he embraced her. For the first time in his life, Damilola felt what no luxury had ever given him: peace. But deep within his chest, a storm brewed. The lie that held their love together was growing heavier each day. He looked at her and whispered, "Amara, promise me something. Whatever happens, never stop believing in love." She smiled faintly. "I promise." But neither of them knew that the test of that promise was already on its way. A truth hidden too long was about to explode, and when it did, hearts would shatter. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Tell me, what would you have done if your mother opposed your love like this? The next Sunday afternoon shimmered with false peace. The Okafor mansion buzzed with laughter and perfumes as Mrs. Okafor hosted her elite women's meeting, a gathering of society wives who measured worth by jewelry weight and the size of their SUVs. Amara hated those gatherings, but this time her mother insisted she attend. "Behave yourself," Mrs. Okafor whispered sharply as guests began arriving. "And don't mention that mechanic of yours. We have real people in this house today." Amara sighed, but obeyed. Unknown to her, her mother had already planned something cruel. Mrs. Okafor had secretly asked one of her driver's boys to invite Damilola to the mansion, pretending it was Amara's request for urgent car repair. The goal was simple: to expose him, to make him look small before her rich friends, and crush whatever feelings Amara had left for him. The poor mechanic would be humiliated beyond recovery. Around 2 p.m., Damilola arrived at the mansion gate, still in his work overalls, carrying his toolbox. He had been surprised when the driver came to the workshop earlier that day. "Madam Amara say you should come fix the car. Urgent." His heart had raced with worry. "Is she okay?" he asked. "She no talk too much, sir. Just come quick." Damilola didn't hesitate. When he reached the gate, the security men looked him up and down with disgust, but opened after confirming he was the mechanic. As he stepped into the grand compound, his eyes swept across the crowd of elegantly dressed women, laughing under a canopy. He froze. Amara was there, staring at him in confusion. "Dami," she whispered under her breath, "what are you doing here?" Before he could answer, her mother's sharp voice cut through the air. "Ah, the famous mechanic has arrived." The laughter around them paused. Dozens of eyes turned his way, some mocking, some curious. Damilola blinked, trying to understand. "Good afternoon, Ma," he said respectfully, bowing slightly. "I was told you needed your car fixed." Mrs. Okafor's lips curved into a cold smile. Yes, my car. It's over there," she said, pointing toward the driveway. "But before that, come closer. My friends here have heard a lot about you." The guests giggled. "Is that him?" one whispered. "So fine, but look at those clothes." Another smirked. "Poor but handsome. A dangerous combination." Damilola walked closer, confusion mixing with embarrassment. Amara stood frozen, her heart pounding. Her mother placed an arm around her shoulder and said loudly, "Ladies, this is the man my daughter wants to marry, a mechanic from Ajagunle." A wave of laughter erupted. Amara's cheeks burned with shame. "Mama, please," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Stop this!" But Mrs. Okafor ignored her. "Tell me, young man," she continued mockingly, "how much do you earn fixing people's cars? Can you afford my daughter's hair, her perfume?" The laughter grew louder. Damilola stood still, his pride wrestling with humility. Every instinct screamed for him to walk away, to reveal who he truly was. But he stayed silent. "Madam," he said softly, "I may not have riches, but I have hands that work and a heart that loves your daughter." The room fell quiet for a moment. Then the laughter exploded again, louder than before. "Oh, please," one woman chuckled, fanning herself. "Is he reciting movie lines?" "A heart that loves can't pay rent," another said, wiping tears of laughter. Amara's eyes filled with anger. "Enough!" she shouted suddenly. "You've all had your fun. He doesn't deserve this." But before she could say more, Damilola touched her hand gently. "It's okay," he whispered. "Let them laugh. A man's truth is not measured by who mocks him." His calmness silenced even the cruelest mouths. Mrs. Okafor's smile faded slightly, unsettled by his composure. "You may leave now," she said coldly. "This house is not your workshop." Damilola nodded quietly. "Thank you, Ma." Then he turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence heavy with shame and confusion. That evening, Amara ran to the workshop, her heart breaking. She found Damilola sitting alone under the dim light, staring at his oil-stained hands. "Why didn't you fight back?" she cried, kneeling beside him. "Why did you let them humiliate you like that?" He looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. "Because I didn't come to fight for pride," he said softly. "I came to fight for love." She grabbed his shirt, trembling. "You shouldn't have come. My mother tricked you." Damilola smiled faintly. "Then let her think she won. Some day the truth will speak louder than money." He stood, brushing his palms together. "Amara, you're worth every insult, every laugh. I'd rather be mocked for loving you than praised for pretending." She broke down in tears, clutching his hand. "You're a better man than they'll ever know." He looked at her with a sadness too deep for words. "And one day, when all this is over, they will see what you saw first. The truth." But inside, Damilola knew the clock was ticking. The lie he had built to test love was now testing him instead. Days passed after the humiliation, but the wound refused to heal. Amara stopped speaking to her mother completely. She moved out of the mansion and rented a small apartment near the mainland, away from gossip and shame. If love means starting over, then I'll start from dust, she told herself. Damilola helped her settle in, fixing her light bulbs, carrying boxes, and turning the empty space into a home. They didn't have much, but every evening, laughter filled the room like wealth itself. Still, something weighed on Damilola's mind. Every night, as Amara slept beside him, he sat by the window, staring into the dark city skyline. The streetlights reflected on his face, and guilt pressed heavy on his chest. She's given up everything for me, he thought. But she doesn't know who I really am. He could feel his secret burning, ready to explode. But how could he tell her now, after she had lost her family and friends defending a poor mechanic? Meanwhile, the city began to whisper. One afternoon, a journalist from City Pulse magazine stopped by Babatunde's workshop. He was investigating a rumor that a strange, educated mechanic had been working incognito in Ajagunle. They say he speaks English, like a university professor, the journalist said, smiling. Even the market women are calling him Ogre London. Babatunde laughed nervously. People like gist too much. Nah, ordinary boy he be. But when the journalist left, Damilola knew trouble was near. The lie he'd built with patience was now attracting light, and light always exposes. That evening, he went to Amara's apartment with a heavy heart. She greeted him with her usual smile, wearing a wrapper and t-shirt, her hair tied in a scarf. "You look worried," she said, touching his arm. "Work stress?" Damilola hesitated, then nodded. Something like that. He sat quietly for a while before whispering, "Amara, if you found out I wasn't who I said I was, would you hate me?" She frowned, confused. "Why would you ask that?" "Just answer," he pressed gently. She smiled faintly. "Dami, even if you were a beggar, I'd still love you. You're my peace." Her words pierced him like a blade wrapped in tenderness. That night, Damilola couldn't sleep. He walked the streets aimlessly, passing danfos, roasted corn sellers, and neon signs glowing over muddy roads. In one shadowed corner, he stopped, watching a young boy sleep on a piece of cardboard. "Once I envied men who had nothing," he murmured. "Now I fear becoming one." His secret had gone too far. He had tasted love's purity, but at the cost of deception. He knew soon he'd have to choose, truth or peace. Days later, his fear came true. The journalist returned, this time with a photographer. He had followed Damilola secretly for a week, watching his movements. What he saw didn't add up. A poor man using an iPhone hidden in his pocket, speaking fluent French to a client, and being visited by men in black SUVs late at night. On Friday morning, the headline hit social media like thunder. Is Ajagunle's famous mechanic actually billionaire Damilola Ajayi? Within hours, the story exploded. Photos of Damilola at charity events resurfaced. Old business interviews reappeared online. The truth was out, and with it, chaos. When Amara saw the news, she froze. Her phone slipped from her hands. Billionaire Damilola Ajayi, pretending to be homeless to find true love. The words blurred before her eyes. She felt her world tilt beneath her feet. Memories crashed through her mind. The night he came to her apartment with grease on his face, the meals they shared, the promises he made. "He lied," she whispered, trembling. All this time, he lied. Her heart raced as tears blurred her sight. That evening, when Damilola arrived at her door, her eyes were swollen and red. "Amara, please," he began softly. "Let me explain." But she stepped back, her voice sharp and trembling. Explain what? That my life was your experiment, that you made me a fool before the world. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. You watched me fight my own mother for you, lose my friends, lose everything, and you never told me the truth. Why? His voice broke. Because I wanted to know if love still existed in a world built on gold. She laughed bitterly through her tears. Congratulations, Damilola Ajayi. You found your answer. Love exists, but not for liars. That night, Damilola stood outside her apartment long after she locked the door. Rain began to fall, slow and steady, soaking his shirt as he whispered her name. Amara, please, I didn't mean to hurt you. But no voice answered, only the echo of his own regret. Inside, Amara sat on the floor, hugging her knees. She wanted to hate him, but every heartbeat betrayed her. Love doesn't vanish because of truth. It just bleeds quietly. Meanwhile, social media erupted. Some praised Damilola as a genius who tested human nature. Others called him a cruel manipulator. Babatunde's workshop overflowed with reporters. Even Musa, his loyal driver, was ambushed for interviews. The secret that began as a quiet search for love had become a wildfire. And as the flames spread, two hearts that once beat together now stood worlds apart, torn between love, betrayal, and the price of truth. The next morning, the entire nation buzzed like a hive. Every gossip blog, TV channel, and radio station had the same headline: The billionaire who pretended to be poor for love. Some called it romantic, others called it madness. But for Amara's mother, Mrs. Okafor, it was opportunity wrapped in shame. She nearly dropped her teacup when she saw Damilola's face on television. Jesus is Lord, she shouted. That mechanic, he's a billionaire? The housemaid ran in, thinking something was wrong. Madam, what happened? Happen? Mrs. Okafor barked. I insulted the son of wealth himself. I called him useless. She grabbed her phone instantly and called her daughter. But Amara didn't answer. She tried again and again. Finally, she texted, Amara, my daughter, please come home. We need to talk. But Amara stared at the message blankly, her heart numb. The same mother who had mocked Damilola yesterday now suddenly wanted him back. She whispered bitterly, now she believes in love, because it smells like money. At the Okafor mansion, chaos ruled. Mrs. Okafor was pacing like a restless cat, while her husband, Mr. Okafor, sat quietly in shock. Do you know what this means? She said breathlessly. If Amara marries him, we become in-laws to one of the richest men in Africa. Do you know what that means for our family name? Her husband sighed. Woman, do you hear yourself? Yesterday you called him a disgrace. Today you call him destiny. Ah, my dear, times change, she said quickly. We must act fast. Go and call our daughter. We must make peace before someone else takes him. But Mr. Okafor only shook his head. That girl will not forgive you easily. Then I will beg her, she cried. I will kneel down if I must. She paused, her voice trembling. We cannot afford to lose this chance. And for the first time, her husband saw fear in her eyes. Not the fear of losing face, but the fear of missing fortune. When Mrs. Okafor finally arrived at Amara's apartment that evening, her daughter barely looked at her. The living room was silent, except for the faint hum of a ceiling fan. My daughter, her mother began softly. You haven't been answering my calls. Amara's tone was cold. What is there to say, Mama? Mrs. Okafor forced a smile. My dear, I came to apologize. I was wrong about Dami. About everything. Amara's eyes lifted slowly, filled with disbelief. You're only saying that because you found out he's rich. Her mother hesitated, then sighed. Does it matter? The important thing is he loves you, and you love him too. Why throw that away? Amara shook her head. Love? You don't understand, Mama. I don't even know who he is anymore. Everything between us was a lie. Mrs. Okafor moved closer. Amara, every marriage has secrets. Men test women in different ways. But what matters now is forgiveness. She smiled sweetly. He's a billionaire, my dear. A real one. Do you know what that means for you? For us? Amara turned her face away. I don't want his money. I wanted his truth. Meanwhile, Damilola's world had become a storm of cameras and questions. Reporters camped outside his mansion in Ikoyi. His company's board demanded statements. Investors called from London and Dubai. He smiled through interviews, claiming he only wanted to experience life without privilege. But behind the cameras, he was haunted by one face, Amara's. Every night, he tried calling her, but she never answered. Musa, his driver, found him sitting by the pool one evening, staring into the water. Oga, you no go rest small? Musa asked. Damilola smiled sadly. How can a man rest when his heart is wandering? You fit still win 'em back, Musa said gently. Na love where you find, no be business. Damilola nodded slowly. You're right, Musa. Money can buy a car, but not the woman who believes in you when the engine fails. The next morning, he dressed in plain clothes, got into a modest car, and drove to the mainland alone. He didn't want bodyguards, no cameras, just a chance to say the words his pride had buried. When he arrived at Amara's apartment, Mrs. Okafor was already there. She nearly fainted when she saw him step out of his car. Ah, Mr. Damilola. Sir, please come in, she stammered, her voice trembling with sudden humility. Damilola ignored her and looked at Amara. Their eyes met, heavy with memories. She stood silently, her lips pressed together. Amara, he began softly, I know you hate me, and maybe you should. But I didn't hide my truth to mock you. I did it to find the kind of love my money never bought. She said nothing, her arms folded tightly. When I first saw you, you treated me like a man, not a wallet. You shared food with me when you thought I had nothing. You gave me laughter when I'd forgotten how to smile. You showed me love when I had no name. That's the woman I fell for. A tear slid down her cheek despite herself. Mrs. Okafor interrupted quickly, her tone suddenly sweet. My daughter forgives you, my son. Please sit down. Let's discuss wedding plans. Damilola turned to her sharply. Madam, with all due respect, this is not about you. The room fell silent. If I ever marry Amara, he said firmly, it will be because her heart says yes, not your ambition. The next few weeks unfolded like a wound healing too slowly to forget. The media frenzy began to fade, but the scars remained. Damilola disappeared from public view. His company released a statement saying he had taken a personal retreat outside the country. But in truth, he had vanished into silence. Even Musa didn't know where he'd gone. The mansion in Ikoyi grew quiet, its windows closed like sleeping eyes. Amara tried to move on, but every part of her life whispered his name. The old workshop felt empty without his laughter, her evenings colder without his voice. She would catch herself staring at his picture online, torn between love and anger. Why couldn't he just be honest? She whispered one night. Why did he have to test me like a stranger? The questions haunted her like echoes in a hollow room. Meanwhile, Lagos carried on, noisy, restless, and unforgiving. Then one morning, a letter arrived. No sender's name, just her address written in neat cursive. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single page. Amara, by the time you read this, I'll be far away. I left not because I stopped loving you, but because I want to become the man you deserve. Honest, free, and worthy of your forgiveness. If love is meant to return, it will find its way back. Damilola. Her breath caught as she read it again and again. Tears rolled down her cheeks, soaking the paper. He's gone, she whispered. She pressed the letter to her chest and cried until her heart went quiet. For the first time, she realized that love wasn't just about being chosen. It was about patience, sacrifice, and truth. Yet a tiny voice inside her refused to give up. If he's out there, she said softly, I'll wait. Months turned into seasons. Amara threw herself into work, expanding her fashion brand. She opened a small boutique in Yaba that grew popular among young women. Her strength became her armor, her pain her fire. People began to call her the Phoenix of Lagos, the woman who rose after heartbreak. But at night, when the world slept, she would still whisper his name like a prayer. One evening, Tenny visited her, full of gossip. Guess what? They said Damilola Ajayi is back in town, she blurted. Amara froze, the fabric in her hands slipping to the floor. Back? She asked quietly. Are you sure? Yes, Tenny nodded eagerly. He was spotted at a charity event yesterday, something about rebuilding orphanages. Amara smiled faintly. He's still helping people, she murmured, even after everything. But deep down, her heart pounded. Could she face him again? Could she forgive? That night she couldn't sleep. The moonlight spilled through her window like memory, and she whispered, maybe some stories don't end. They just pause until the hearts are ready again. Meanwhile, Damilola had returned to Lagos quietly. He had spent 6 months in Ghana, volunteering at rural auto schools, teaching young boys mechanical skills. It was his way of atoning, not to the public, but to himself. He came back humbler, wiser, carrying the silence of the mountains he'd preyed upon. When Musa saw him, tears filled the old driver's eyes. Oga, you don't suffer small o, he said, laughing through emotion. Damilola smiled. Suffering teaches a man his limits, Musa, but love teaches him his worth. He wanted to see Amara immediately, but fear held him back. Instead, he visited Babatunde's workshop first. The old man looked up and froze. Ha! My boy Don turned superstar, he exclaimed. Damilola laughed, kneeling to greet him. Baba, no superstar here, just your stubborn apprentice. They hugged tightly. After a while, Babatunde said softly, She came here often, you know, waiting for you. Damilola's chest tightened. She did? That girl loves you deep. Don't waste that kind of heart again, my son. That night, Damilola sat alone on the same wooden bench where he had once fixed cars with Amara. The moon hung low, silent witness to his regrets. I hurt her, he whispered. But maybe love deserves one last truth. He reached for his phone and typed a message but didn't send it. Instead, he decided to see her face to face, to speak not as a billionaire or a beggar, but as a man who had learned humility. Tomorrow he would find her. But somewhere across town, Amara stood by her window, staring at the same moon. If our hearts still remember, she whispered, maybe they can forgive. The air outside felt charged with fate. Two souls, bound by truth and time, were about to meet again. The question was, would love forgive deception, or would pride finish what lies began? If you've been following this story till now, don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell me, if you were Amara, would you forgive him, or walk away forever? The night of the charity gala glowed with glamour. The ballroom at Echo Hotel was filled with Lagos's elite, politicians, CEOs and celebrities dressed in shining fabrics. Cameras flashed like lightning, and a jazz band hummed softly in the background. Amara stood near the entrance, her heart pounding beneath her gold evening gown. She hadn't planned to come, but her company had been invited to showcase handmade designs. Her success had finally brought her into the world she once rejected, the world of the wealthy. As she stood, greeting guests politely, a sudden hush swept through the hall. Heads turned. Damilola had just entered, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, simple yet regal. His calm presence silenced even the gossiping tongues. Amara froze. Time slowed as their eyes met across the room. The air thickened. Every heartbeat reminded her of the storm they'd survived. He began to walk toward her, each step deliberate, eyes locked on hers. The crowd seemed to fade away until it was just them. Two souls bound by love and truth, facing the moment they'd both avoided for too long. "Good evening, Miss Okafor," Damilola said softly when he finally reached her. His tone was polite, formal, almost too controlled. Amara's voice wavered. "Good evening, Mr. Ajayi." It sounded strange, the name she once never used. "I see you're doing well," he said, glancing at her display stand filled with Ankara gowns. "Your designs are beautiful." She managed a faint smile. "Thank you. And I see you've returned." "Yes," he said simply. "Returned to face what I ran from." A long silence lingered between them, heavy but necessary. Then he added quietly, "Can we talk privately?" She hesitated, glancing around at the curious eyes watching. After a pause, she nodded. They slipped out to the garden terrace overlooking the city lights. The night breeze carried the soft sound of the ocean, and for a moment they were back in the world that had once belonged only to them. Damilola took a deep breath, his voice low but steady. "Amara, I've replayed that night 1,000 times. The night you found out who I was. If I could change anything, I'd tell you the truth sooner. I'd choose honesty over fear." Amara folded her arms, her eyes glistening. "You had so many chances to tell me, Dami. Every day I defended you. Every time I fought for you. You could have said something, but you let me bleed for your lie." His voice cracked. "I know, and I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life." He moved closer. "But please believe this. Nothing about my love for you was fake. Every smile, every touch, every moment. All real." Amara looked away, tears burning behind her eyes. "You don't understand, Damilola. I didn't fall in love with a billionaire. I fell in love with a man who slept on a workshop floor, who laughed at little things, who made me feel safe." She paused, her voice trembling. "Now I don't know if that man ever existed." He stepped closer, his eyes glistening under the city lights. "He existed, Amara. He was the truest version of me, stripped of titles and wealth, the man who fixed cars to fix his soul." She looked up at him then, truly seeing the pain in his face. "Then why leave?" she asked softly. "Why disappear?" "Because love without honesty is prison," he said. "I had to free myself before I could come back to you. I wanted to earn your trust the right way, not as a game, not as a disguise, but as a man who's learned to be transparent." Amara stood still, her heart torn between old wounds and new hope. She wanted to stay angry, to punish him, but his words pierced through every wall she'd built. The city lights reflected in her tears as she whispered, "You broke me, Damilola. But the worst part is, I still love you." His eyes softened, and he reached out, his hand trembling slightly. "Then let me spend the rest of my life mending what I broke." The band inside began to play a soft high-life tune, muffled by the wind. For a long moment, Neither of them spoke. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath. Then Amara sighed deeply. Love is not just words, Dami. It's consistency. He nodded. Then I'll be consistent. Every day, for as long as you'll have me. A faint smile touched her lips, fragile but real. She looked at him, her voice quieter now. You really think people like us can start over? We already have, he said softly. It started the moment you looked at me again. They stood there under the Lagos night, two hearts that had broken, finding rhythm again. Behind them, the city lights shimmered like blessings, and for the first time in months, Amara's heart felt peace, not confusion. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, forgiveness was enough. Sometimes, that's how love begins again, not in perfection, but in surrender. The days after the gala were strangely quiet. Amara returned to her boutique, trying to focus on work, but her thoughts drifted endlessly. Every time she stitched a dress or took a customer's order, she remembered Damilola's face on that terrace, the sincerity in his voice, the humility in his eyes. She wanted to forgive, but her heart was cautious. Too much had been lost, too many wounds reopened. Still, something inside her whispered that people could change. Meanwhile, Damilola kept his promise. He stayed consistent. No grand gestures, no show of wealth, just quiet effort. Every morning, fresh flowers arrived at her shop, not roses, but hibiscus and lilies, wrapped in brown paper with no note. He also began investing anonymously in her business, helping her expand without revealing his hand. Her rent suddenly dropped, her supply costs eased, and one afternoon, she learned that her boutique had been featured in a lifestyle magazine as Lagos' rising fashion brand. She smiled faintly, knowing who was behind it, but she said nothing. Forgiveness, she told herself, must be earned, not demanded. Meanwhile, the world watched Damilola differently now. Investors who once adored him began to question his sanity. You humiliated yourself for love, one foreign partner told him coldly. You made the company look like a circus. Board members murmured about removing him as CEO. But Damilola didn't flinch. If truth costs me money, then it's a fair trade, he said calmly. He had learned that integrity sometimes demanded sacrifice. Yet, deep inside, he longed for peace, the kind only Amara's forgiveness could give. One evening, Musa approached him in his office. Ogre, he said carefully, you fit by everything, but you no fit by time. If you love her, stop hiding behind flowers and favors. Talk to her again. Damilola looked out the window, the city glowing beneath him. Maybe you're right, Musa, he murmured. It's time to face her again, not as a savior, but as a man ready to rebuild what he broke. The following Sunday, Amara closed her shop early and visited an orphanage she often donated to. When she arrived, she was surprised to see new renovations, freshly painted walls, new beds, and smiling children in clean uniforms. The matron greeted her warmly. You came at the right time, my dear. Our new sponsor is here. Amara turned and froze. Standing at the playground, surrounded by laughing children, was Damilola. He was wearing a simple white shirt, jeans and slippers, kneeling as he helped a little boy tie his shoelace. He looked up slowly, their eyes meeting like dawn after a long night. You again, she said quietly. He smiled faintly. I told you I'd be consistent. The matron, sensing the tension, excused herself politely. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the children play. Why here? Amara finally asked. Because this was where I learned what love really means, he said. Giving without expecting, healing without demanding. He turned to her. I'm not here to win you back, Amara. I'm here to be better, even if you never look my way again. Her eyes softened despite herself. You've changed, she said slowly. You don't speak like the man who lied to me. He smiled. Maybe pain taught me honesty. She looked at the playground again, where a little girl tugged at his sleeve and handed him a flower. He knelt, accepted it, and smiled warmly. You'd make a good father, Amara whispered before she could stop herself. He looked at her, emotion flickering in his gaze. Then I hope someday you'll let me prove it. She didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. They spent the next hour helping the children with their art project, painting small wooden hearts in bright colors. When it was time to leave, Damilola handed her one painted heart, the words written in his careful handwriting, "Love is not perfect, it's patient." She held it silently, and for the first time, her tears were not bitter. They were cleansing. Maybe love didn't have to be flawless. Maybe it just needed truth, effort, and time. That night, Amara sat by her window again, the wooden heart resting in her palm. The city outside was alive, horns, laughter, the heartbeat of Lagos. But inside, she felt something new, calm, the kind that comes after a storm has emptied itself. She picked up her phone and typed a short message. Tomorrow, meet me at the workshop, where it all began. Then she pressed send before her courage faded. Damilola, miles away in his quiet home, read the message and closed his eyes in gratitude. Thank you, he whispered to the night. Tomorrow, the same place that birthed their story, the dusty workshop that had seen their laughter, their love, and their pain, would decide their future. Sometimes, destiny doesn't need grand stages or palaces. It needs one small space where love first learned to breathe. The next morning dawned softly, the kind of Lagos sunrise that painted the air with quiet gold. Damilola arrived early at Babatunde's workshop, the place where everything had started, his disguise, his lessons, his love. The familiar smell of engine oil and dust filled his lungs, and memories flooded back. He stood beside the old bench where he'd first fixed Amara's car, running his fingers across the worn wood. This place taught me who I was, he murmured. Babatunde emerged from the back, his face breaking into a wide smile. Ah, my billionaire apprentice Don show face again. Damilola laughed gently. Baba, you never change. Why I go change when life still they teach me lesson every day, the old man replied. She go come? Damilola nodded slowly. She said she would. Then you better prepare your heart, Babatunde said wisely. When woman forgive, it's miracle. When she truly love, it's grace. Don't waste grace again. Damilola nodded, his chest heavy with hope and fear. Minutes later, a familiar car stopped outside. Amara stepped out slowly, her yellow Ankara dress catching the morning light. The workshop boys froze, recognizing her instantly. Damilola's breath caught. She looked different, calmer, stronger, radiant in simplicity. She walked toward him, her heels crunching against gravel, and stopped a few feet away. You came, he said softly. You invited me, she replied, her tone unreadable. They stood in silence, the ghosts of their past floating between them. Finally, she looked around. This place, she said quietly. It holds every version of us. The lie, the love, and the lesson. Damilola nodded. It's where I learned that even a rich man can be poor in peace. She turned her gaze back to him. And it's where I learned that love without truth is like a car without an engine. Beautiful, but going nowhere. They both smiled faintly. The words heavier than they sounded. Why did you really choose me? Amara asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Damilola hesitated, then spoke from his heart. Because you never looked at me like everyone else did. When you spoke to me, it wasn't to impress or to gain. You treated me like a person, not a project. That day your car broke down. I thought I was helping you. But I realize now, you were the one sent to fix me. Amara's eyes glistened, her lips trembling slightly. You made me doubt everything I believed about love, she said. But you also made me feel it in ways I never knew before. She stepped closer. I don't need luxury, Dami. I just need honesty. He swallowed hard. Then you'll have nothing but that from me. No secrets, no tests, no disguises. Just a man who learned too late that the truth is more powerful than gold. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Amara reached into her bag and pulled out something small, the painted wooden heart from the orphanage. Love is not perfect, it's patient, she read softly. I think I'm ready to believe that again. Tears filled Damilola's eyes. Slowly, he dropped to one knee, not with a ring, but with both hands open. Amara Okafor, he said, his voice breaking, I don't ask you to forget. I ask you to start again, with truth as our only wealth. She looked at him, her heart pounding. The workshop boys peeked from behind the shed, whispering prayers they didn't understand. Babatunde stood at a distance, smiling knowingly. The moment stretched, fragile, trembling. Then Amara took a deep breath, stepped forward, and placed the wooden heart in his palms. If we're starting again, she said softly, then this time, no lies, no masks, just us. Damilola rose slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Just us, he repeated. And when she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest, the whole workshop seemed to exhale. The noise of the city faded, replaced by the quiet hum of engines and the steady rhythm of two hearts that had finally found peace in their truth. That evening, as the sun melted into the Lagos skyline, the old workshop glowed in golden light. The workers laughed and cheered, calling it the day love won. Babatunde clapped his hands. You see life? The same place where shame happen, nor the same place joy return. That's how God works. Amara smiled through her tears. Damilola held her hand gently, and together they watched the sky turn orange. I used to think wealth meant control, he said quietly. Now I know it means gratitude. She squeezed his hand. And I used to think love meant perfection. Now I know it means patience. They looked at each other, both smiling through the scars. The story that began with disguise had found its truth in honesty. Sometimes, life breaks us just to rebuild us into something real. And for Damilola and Amara, the workshop, dusty, loud, and humble, became the temple where love was reborn. Months passed after that morning at the workshop, and Lagos seemed to move with new rhythm. Damilola and Amara began to rebuild their love quietly, without noise or gossip. They didn't post pictures or flaunt wealth. They built peace instead. Every Sunday, they returned to Babatunde's workshop, not as lovers seeking secrecy, but as partners with purpose. They started a small foundation called Hands of Grace, aimed at training underprivileged youth in mechanical and fashion skills. The workshop that once held their heartbreak now echoed with laughter, learning, and hope. Amara would teach sewing under a mango tree, while Damilola guided young men at the garage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And in that dusty yard, surrounded by oil stains and fabric scraps, they found what no mansion had ever given them: contentment. One evening as they packed up for the day, Damilola looked around and smiled. This place made us poor, he said softly, so we could learn the value of wealth that lasts. Amara laughed gently. and now it's making others rich, in hope. One day, Babatunde gathered everyone in the workshop for a small celebration. "Now 1-year anniversary today," he said proudly. "See how God turns sorrow to joy." He handed Damilola a framed photograph, the old workshop on one side, and on the other, a group of smiling apprentices holding tools and fabric. "Your story give people hope," Baba said with watery eyes. "Now lessons say, even rich man need humility, and even poor man deserve respect." Amara hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Baba. You were our guardian when we had no direction." The old man chuckled. "I know do anything. Now love do the work." The crowd laughed softly, and for a moment, everyone stood under the sunset, breathing peace. Later that evening, as they closed the gate, Amara whispered, "Do you ever think about how different life could have been if you didn't come here pretending?" Damilola smiled. "Maybe I'd still be rich, but empty. Sometimes God hides truth inside mistakes." A few months later, Amara's mother, Mrs. Okafor, visited the workshop. She had aged a little, her pride mellowed by guilt. She walked slowly, unsure if she would be welcomed. Amara saw her first, her heart pounding. "Mama," she whispered, "you came." Mrs. Okafor's eyes filled with tears. "I came to say sorry, my daughter, to you and to him." Damilola stood quietly, his face kind but distant. She knelt unexpectedly, shocking everyone. "Please forgive me. I mocked what I didn't understand. I thought wealth made worth, but I was blind." Damilola bent quickly, lifting her up. "Madam, please. No mother should kneel before her child's husband." His words softened her tears. "You truly are a good man," she whispered. "Amara is blessed." Amara hugged her mother tightly, crying softly. The forgiveness that day didn't just heal their family, it healed the entire story. Sometimes, grace arrives late, but it always arrives. As time passed, their story began to spread beyond Lagos. A journalist who once mocked Damilola wrote a heartfelt feature titled, "The Billionaire Who Found Love in Greece." It went viral, inspiring couples across Africa. People quoted Amara's line, "Love without truth is like a car without an engine." Universities invited Damilola to speak about integrity and humility. But no matter where fame followed, he always returned to the workshop every weekend, hands dirty, laughter loud. One afternoon, a young man approached him shyly. "Sir," he said, "I want to marry, but I'm poor." Damilola smiled gently. "Then make sure your heart is rich first." The boy blinked. "Sir?" Damilola chuckled. "If your heart is pure, even poverty will respect you." It was a lesson learned through scars, not textbooks, and as he watched the boy walk away, he realized life had given him everything he once sought: truth, love, and peace that no disguise could buy. On their second wedding anniversary, Amara and Damilola renewed their vows, not in a cathedral or hotel ballroom, but right there in Babatunde's workshop. It was quiet, intimate, and filled with meaning. The same spot where their lies were born now held their truth. Babatunde stood as witness, tears in his eyes as they exchanged rings once more. "This time," Amara said softly, smiling at Damilola, "I marry not a billionaire or a mechanic, but my friend." He smiled back, "And I marry not perfection, but patience." As the small crowd applauded, a gentle rain began to fall, washing the dust off the roof and cooling the air. Damilola looked at her and whispered, "The rain started it, and the rain blesses it again." She nodded, tears shining. The narrator's voice faded in like a heartbeat. "Love tested by truth becomes unbreakable. Wealth tested by humility becomes meaningful. And when both meet at the crossroad of forgiveness, heaven smiles." If this story touched your heart, the voice softened warmly. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell us, do you believe love can survive deception if truth finally wins? The end.